some videos from a play called Punch, which has been on in the West End and in New York Broadway recently. That play was adapted from my book, Right from Wrong, which follows the story of my incarceration into prison, or you might call it correctional facility. And once I went to prison for manslaughter for throwing a punch, that which led to the death of another man called James. And when I came out of custody, out of prison, I met David and Joan, who were the parents of James. And we did restorative justice. I don't know how much everybody around the world knows about restorative justice, but it does originate in indigenous communities. And we are now friends, and we now campaign together to promote restorative justice, to find new ways forward, to build common ground across some of these divisive issues. And what you're going to see now is an extract, some clips from the West End and the Broadway play.
Sorry, let me just get to the right.
It's okay. And you might want to just skip the first bit with the stars. No one cares if it's 5 or 4 stars.
Jacob! The Meadows has a shit ton of CCTV high up on lampposts to make them harder to knock down. It became the stuff of urban legend that you could get from one side of the estate to the other without being picked up once by the cameras.
You want to go up Mondella on the east side, then duck behind the abandoned white van at the top, arching across the street to the west side, under the pass to Bowvale, spinning north, over the fence between numbers 12 and 14, behind the bins towards Aldgate.
It turns the Meadows into a kind of real-life, multi-level video game. And me and the younger lads were determined to complete it.
Go on, Jake, mate. Dare you? Fucking double dare you, mate. Fucking come on!
Do it!
Get down!
Oh, leg it, Jacob!
Go on,
Jake! I know what this is. You're covering for someone. Peer pressure. One of your mates. Why did you have to get mixed up with them mates? They're not real friends. Oh, God, that picture they had of you on East Midlands today, your mugshot, that's not you. I've got the real pictures of you, the real you. They're all around this house. I used to be a right laugh. I did. I was thinking the other day, and then I looked in the mirror this morning, and I was like, where did... Yeah, that anger and pain, and how to move on from it. But do I want to move on from it when I don't want to move on from James? But then, for James, I've been wondering, instead of all this, if we tried something else.
Something else?
I've been wondering if we should write to him. Ask him things.
Who? Him? Why? We saw him, Joe. In the dock. He wouldn't look at us. Just a thug. A helpless, hopeless, nasty sod him. A thug. Evil.
David, nothing else is working. What would James do?
Okay, so we've each been through the ground rules for this meeting today, so if I could please ask that we remember those. particularly the agreement to listen to each other and allow everyone the opportunity to have their say. Okay? John, you wanted to speak first, so over to you.
Well, we wanted to say that it's good that you've come. And it's been helpful to us for you to answer our questions, so thank you for that. From what you've written to us, our understanding of what happened, and we want to check with you that this is your understanding of what happened, is that you didn't mean to kill James. You didn't know who he was or see what was happening in the bar before that. You saw friends and thought they were in trouble, and so you ran in and just swung your fist without thinking, and that was that. That's what we've taken from what you've told us.
And then here, I think we have some feedback from audiences, which I thought would be interesting, because we're stimulating these conversations with the public around justice.
Here's a story where the parents of someone they lost in their life managed to reach across that pain and forgive the person that took that person from them.
To have our story told is an opportunity to get important messages across about anti-violence, restorative justice.
There is another way forward. There is always a path to turn back.
Nobody would not be inspired by John and David.
They teach me how to be a better human being every day.
I think that in this age of adolescence, I think we're stuffed if we think there's no such thing as restorative justice.
I'm very deeply concerned with dealing with crime beyond locking people up and throwing away the key. I hope this will have an influence.
I've been sharing this story with the world for nearly 15 years. It just feels surreal that we're now able to share it in the West End.
If it just makes a difference to one family, saves maybe one life, this is what it's all about.
And so this is what it's all about. It's about bringing people together, having these conversations, finding new ways forward, and staying hopeful. I went to a lecture about hope recently, and there were 4. You can actually measure hope, believe it or not, and it's with 3 ingredients: having a goal, having willpower, and the most important 3rd ingredient is having pathways and a strategy moving forward. And perhaps I would say that everybody on this call, we have a shared goal of more human justice systems. We have the willpower and co-creating and coming together to try and look at pathways forward together collectively. And one person who I know shares those ambitions and those principles is Emily Thomas. Is Emily with us? Because my configuration has gone all funny on my screen.
I am here, Jacob.
Oh, there you are. You're a voice. And our connection, Emily, is, would you just like to give a brief introduction to your role at ISIS, which is a prison in the UK?
Yeah, so I'm the governing governor at HMP ISIS, which is in southeast London. I've been the governor here for just coming up to 10 years. And we look after young men, mostly from the London area, who are aged between 18 and 27.
Perfect. And we kind of knew each other before Punch, the play, but for the purposes of this conversation and our connection, we actually screened the play for the first time in prison, to the young men in prison. And we had popcorn, and we had we made it as much like going to the theatre as possible. And I just wondered why was that important for you to say yes to us coming in and screening a play and hosting the play inside the prison?
Well, I mean, I guess, one of the reasons is the most obvious one, which is the subject matter of the play, which we, were confident would resonate with young men that we look after. But I guess the broader context is about efforts that we've made over the years to try to ensure that there is access and interaction with the arts within the prison, and establishing partnerships. So the reason we were able to access the screening of Punch was because of our pre-existing relationship with the Young Vic Theatre, who had been delivering courses and workshops with us for quite some time, and it was we'd screened, we certainly screened Punch. We'd also screened a play with a really long name that was also on in the West End, which it's called Four Black Boys, but then there's a whole bit that comes after that I can never remember. And again, for similar reasons, the resonance of the subject matter with the young men that we look after, and just being able to kind of give young men in prison an experience they may not ever have experienced before, of seeing a play and seeing that kind of production put on, and feeling that maybe it was something that was more accessible to them than they might have thought.
Yeah, exactly. We do know that theatres tend to be attended by a demographic of people who tend to maybe have a bit more spare change. And one thing that we've done and that you're doing at ISIS is to make the arts more accessible, because of all those benefits that can come from being engaged with the arts and being able to try new things and experience new things. So you say you've been at ISIS for 10 years. Did you know very early on at your time at ISIS that you would have this emphasis and on the arts?
No, probably not. I think it's something which developed as I was here, and probably something really particular to the young men that I look after, and probably in particular because I have 600 young men at ISIS, and they're all young, obviously. But the other thing that makes ISIS really unusual within the prison system is that 75% of my population are from a minority ethnic background. 45% of the population are young black men, and there was always a kind of there was a really I think the thing that developed for me was thinking about how their voices, how their stories were even less heard than anybody else, and that that was a problem for the arts, and a problem for those and an issue for those young men who didn't necessarily have an opportunity to tell those stories. And of course, the other bit, which is that in the absence of young black men telling their own stories, people tell stories about them, and represent them in particular ways, which aren't necessarily the way that they should be represented.
No, definitely. I'm a big advocate for anywhere where we can help people retell their own stories and shape their own narratives. But the narratives that are written for us, it is a big problem. But I'm glad that there are lots of people on this call who are helping people write their own narratives and creating spaces for people to express and play with new ideas and new ways of seeing themselves and others around them and their place in society. Can you tell us a bit more about, so you mentioned Untold, but Untold is the organisation that sits within ISIS prison, which delivers most of the artistic workshops that you guys do. Is that correct?
That's right. So I founded Untold as a charity in just coming out of COVID, and from the beginning, and if you can go to our website, it's lovely. It was co-designed by young men in ISIS, and from the beginning it was about increasing access to creative opportunities within the prison, but two things really. One was about trying to embed creative arts delivery into the prison. So instead of, sometimes in prison, things, creative delivery can be short-lived. It's a week-long course or a 2-week course that you can do, but it isn't something you can do again and again. So I wanted it to be very much kind of established as part of prison delivery. And then the other thing was about making sure that there were vocational pathways. So not just kind of, not something that was going to exist just within prison, but engaging with really credible partners like the Young Vic to demonstrate that this wasn't just something that you could do in prison, but was an opportunity to think about what the career opportunities, what the job opportunities were on release, in some areas that young men may not necessarily ever have thought about, and in which they are, particularly young Black men, very underrepresented. So yeah, that was the idea, and what we try and do is co-design delivery with young men at ISIS. So when we've done a whole range of creative arts projects. We've just finished a partnership with the Central St Martin's, the fashion college. They're crazy, but we did a fashion show at the end, which was exhausting, but incredible for kind of being able to do that in a prison. I've got a boy who was a young man who was a prisoner at ISIS who is now a catwalk model, and he came back to help us to put the fashion show on.
Wow, that's impressive. I bet there's quite a few more other success stories as well. But before we touch on some of those, what kind of stuff is on offer at the moment that's being delivered by Untold?
So we're just doing a creative writing course at the moment. So the people I've got 2 people who work for Untold full time. One delivers a full-time music course. So our second music concert is scheduled for the beginning of May. We did one last year, it was really very successful. And then Deborah, who works as the programs coordinator, is herself a spoken word artist. So the music tutor Joshua and Deborah have got together, and they're delivering a creative writing course at the moment. So kind of lyric writing, poetry, spoken word, kind of doing the whole thing. What we're looking for is entries to Kurtzler, because the deadline for that is coming up. And putting on a sharing at the end. We've just finished doing acting with Young Vic. And there's some things we do all the time. So we do a weekly podcast. So we've got a group of young men who do podcasting, and that goes out on the kind of internal radio for ISIS, which we don't call Radio ISIS for obvious reasons. We make content for the TV channel as well, depending on what we're doing. And then, of course, we did fashion, which was, a little bit crazy. And we're also doing a course on creative entrepreneurship. So that's with the University of Greenwich, and that's kind of trying to, again, allow people to think about how they could make something into a career or something they could do post-release. So yeah, we kind of try and cover everything.
Yeah, and I think what you identified is really, it sounds simple, but I guess it's not always common practice in terms of having that consistent provision and outlet for people to continue to go onto that course instead of it just being kind of like a one-off drop-in, and also creating that sustainability around and those partnerships.
Yeah, and I think what we've essentially done is created a brand. So, I mean, I do obviously want you all to go and look at the website, but which is www.untold.org.uk. But one of the reasons for that is it was co-designed. We won an award. So we was co-designed with young men in prison. But that manifesto on there is, what we do. But we've created such a strong brand identity that there are young men within the prison who've done more than one Untold course. And I think some of the challenges around creative arts delivery in prison is just the practicalities. You've got to go and recruit some young men, so they've got to see the poster that says there's going to be a thing and what the dates are. They've got to apply for it. Somebody's got to remember to put them on a list. Then somebody's got to remember to unlock them. What we've been able to do with Untold is we've created a strong brand identity. So young men want to do an Untold course and they're less interested about what it is because they believe it'll be good, because they believe, they like Untold. And because we were embedded into the prison, and it obviously doesn't help that it's not, it's not unhelpful that I'm the governor, is that we're able to get people's names added to lists. We're able to kind of make sure, that people get to where they need to be, and those courses are sustainable, and people get through the gate at the right time to deliver them, and the equipment is right for the things that we need to be doing. And I think some, those really practical things are always the challenges in prison, aren't they? It's you're not defeated by complicated things. You're defeated by, can I bring some felt tip pens and some paper through the gate.
Yes. We're going to open up some questions shortly, Emily, but I just wondered, we're bringing people together today to think about a more human future for our justice system, and you're a governor in a prison. So for people on the call here, we might have people from the third sector, charity sector, other people trying to make change happen in other areas. And what you've described is about developing those partnerships, which I think are crucial moving forward. What would your advice be to anybody that's trying to access prisons or people who are working in prisons that want to develop partnerships on the outside? Is there anything that you think are kind of like golden rules for kind of doing this type of partnership work with prisons and developing those relationships? Is there anything that comes to mind?
Well, I would say don't give up, because it's and I'm the actual governor, and I find some of our kind of bureaucratic systems unfathomable. There is definitely something about brokering relationships before you start, cold calling prisons, emailing the governor, really not that likely to work. But thinking about the other kind of networks that exist, LinkedIn, lots of people, I'm on LinkedIn, lots of my team are on LinkedIn. So sometimes it's better to kind of, go through a sort of mediator to find out what's going on, and then really understanding that, for everything that prisons put in place that is just prisons being annoying, there are lots of things that prisons are doing because they have to, and it's about safety, and it's about security, and it's about making sure that things run smoothly. So understanding that it's incredibly difficult for prisons to adapt too much for your delivery, and your delivery is going to have to adapt to the prison environment, is pretty key. I think every conversation we have with partners is always like, this is how the regime runs. You might want to have young men in your workshop for 5 hours a day, but they're going to want to go to the gym. So your workshop needs to be 2.5 hours, and it needs to be on a morning and an afternoon, because that's when Meridian can get to the, because I think sometimes people come in and kind of go, we want to do this, and it's 4 days, and it's 2 4-hour sessions, and it's got to be, and you're like, well, it's not going to work. So really thinking about adapting to the what are the realities of prison, and I try and explain that we're not just being arseholes, that they genuinely will want to go to the gym, and I obviously I work with a lot of adolescent young men, and I kind of say they aren't going to sit still beyond 2.5 hours. So I think it's getting that kind of thing.
So don't give up, be resilient.
Yes.
Be flexible.
Yes.
And network well.
Yes.
But I think there's one other thing that you touched on, which for those of you that don't know, some of our panel speakers, we've been pre-recording some of these conversations, and everyone on the call will be able to go back and listen to all of our panel speakers in our longer form podcast episodes. But one of the emerging themes from that is about brand and about community. And I know you said that you've created a brand with Untold. And I think that's a really something to bear in mind as these conversations and workshops move forward, in terms of what communities are you part of, what brands are you a part of, in terms of this movement, and how can we support each other to kind of create those brands or connect those brands and continue these conversations. But is there anything else that you wanted to talk about, Emily, in terms of Untold and what you're doing before we open up some questions?
No, not really, but I would, but on that point about relationships. So, I mean, Nina won't mind me saying that I've known Nina for years in various different roles. We had children, we had babies about the same time, and Jacob, you and I met before you know, before you brought in Punch, which was through the Young Vic, you know, through my relationship with the Young Vic, I've met, I'm now the trustee for another charity, which is about getting young men into, or all ex-offenders into backstage theatre jobs, which I think you know about, you know, you're engaged in as well. So there is a thing about, we are already making these connections. You know, I was surprised once when I'd established Untold, just how many people I already knew, or when I met them, they already knew 6 or 7 other people who were doing similar things. And I think that's absolutely right. I think part of the challenge of delivering in prisons often is it's very small organizations trying to do it alone. And your reach isn't going to be huge, and your you know, just getting that foot in the door is going to be much more difficult. But actually, as a community with a brand, you can do more, because you can you can exploit those connections, but also you can say wasn't just my bright idea. I've got some kind of endorsement from a you know, a broader community of people who you know, also have some expertise and knowledge in this area.
Yeah, very insightful there. And people on this call who are we surely picking up these conversations with afterwards, moving forward. But does anybody have any questions on this part of the workshop around humanizing through the arts, or anything that we spoke about so far? If we have any hands up, or
is that someone trying to come on? Just got a question. I've got a question for you, Jacob. Just was about the reaction to Punch, and was it what you expected? What were people's reactions in the US and the UK? What positive things have come of it? How do you think Punch has helped humanize the issue?
I think the power of Punch and that story in particular is that usually, you know, it's a debate about, should we be tough on crime, should we be soft on crime? Is it about personal circumstances and cost of living and poverty and adverse childhood experiences and all those legitimate contributing factors to why somebody might go commit crime, school exclusions, the rest of it? Or is it personal choice and personal accountability? And there's these binary debates. But I think the thing about a story that's based in restorative justice is that what it's been able to do is shift the conversation forward, because you're able to put yourself in everybody's shoes, both the victims and the perpetrators. So it's not a shouting match about, you know, who's a victim and who's not, and who deserves more support and who doesn't. So I think the story itself, in terms of it being based around restorative justice and the way that it's been written, and all those different artistic forms of costume design, of lighting design, of script writing, of acting, you know, theatre is probably one of the most powerful forms of art that brings together all forms of art into one piece of art. And it's performed live in front of people that aren't on their phones and scrolling and being distracted. And it's a story that enables everybody to put yourself in everybody's shoes, and realize that it's not as simple as some people might make out, the justice reform issues. And so it's been overwhelming, and I guess it touches on what it is doing, even without me having any control over it. It is almost creating a brand, and it's creating a movement with lots of people who are engaging with the play, having that collective experience. You know, it's convening conferences, it's convening change makers to go and experience it with each other. It's and it has a future life. We have a national tour in 2027. It's currently on now in my hometown of Nottingham, and it's being accessed by lots of young people, policymakers. Although I'm banging my head against the wall sometimes when it comes to the policymakers, because they say all the right things, they send all their team to come and see Punch, and then they say, actually, we're not going to support restorative justice. And I go, but that's another conversation for another day.